Did you hit that?
Yes, I did.
Well, then we're underway.
We are underway.
Well, and happy to have everybody here to this introduction webinar to Stats Race Lens. You certainly have heard on a steady basis the past 6 weeks during this beta period introducing this entirely new platform, an outstanding number of features that frankly are almost overwhelming, and we're going to try to help everybody get introduced, understand what is available to you here. We'll do I'm sure a number of these. Nobody's going to conquer the Race Lens product in one sitting, but let's dive in. We've got a big and growing crowd that is joining us, and we're happy to have you. And I'd like to start just by kind of getting some introductions so that everybody knows who's involved and the team that has been behind Race Lens. David Siegel joining us. David, good afternoon.
Thanks for putting this together, Steve, and having me. We're really, really excited about this product, and I'm happy to start to tell the world about it.
Talk a little bit. I think those that followed things like the Jockey Club Roundtable, going back a couple of years, that have heard about the big data project and the idea of putting some powerful handicapping tools in players' hands. Talk about the development of this concept, how you're involved, the whole concept behind it, what Equibase's role is, TrackMaster. There's a lot of people that are looking at the Equibase handicapping interface probably for the first time.
Sure. Well, this project actually got its start, I'd say almost 2.5 years ago, when we've had some broad-based discussions with Bloomberg at the time, the same Bloomberg financial institution that everybody is aware of, and Bloomberg had a sports division, and they were very active in several of the major league sports and worldwide soccer. And we began to talk about possible applications for horse racing. And then as time went along, Bloomberg separated its sports division from the balance of Bloomberg, and then they were acquired by a company called Stats LLC. And we formalized an agreement with Stats LLC for basically the joint development of a high-end handicapping product, and that was about 18 months ago. And since that time, the Equibase team, which includes folks on both coasts in Lexington, Kentucky, and where I work in Silicon Valley as part of TrackMaster, and we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Equibase, where we get heavily involved in product development for Equibase. So all these minds basically got together to develop a very, very high-end and sophisticated racing project. The folks at Stats really have a ton of expertise in big data and in laying out product and nifty consumer-facing interfaces. And we, of course, had the horse racing knowledge, but not the big data expertise that Stats had. So this was sort of a match made in heaven. And the product got really, really serious in terms of development, as I said, just a little less than 18 months ago. And it's been a collaborative effort by both groups. And about 6 or 8 weeks ago, we went into a beta phase. And so even though I've described it as being both of our teams, there's a lot more involvement of outside folks. So as we were developing the product, we brought together large numbers of handicappers to get their input. And even as we've moved forward through this process, we had a couple of hundred people in a closed beta test, which basically means people used it every day, reported issues and bugs to us, but more importantly, pointed out features that they wanted to see in the product that we may not have had in the initial design. So while you had the Equibase team and the Stats team at the core, you really had an awful lot of input from a lot of sophisticated handicappers along the way.
And as a jumping off point to that issue, actually, is there's a lot of things at work here, David. I mean, I've been interfacing with it, and through the Saratoga season, went regularly to look at the angles. We'll talk about the ones that are established. I've already had a great question from Agra Lewis, who's asking about how to build one's own angle. But lay out the top line in terms of the options, because it is a sophisticated past performance. It has research components to it that are very similar to some established platforms in terms of creating a set of criteria and then sourcing specific trainer information and the kinds of nuggets that I think certain players are already familiar with. But there's layer upon layer of information here. How do you suggest somebody looking at it for the first time, what should their eyes be drawn to? What should they get familiar with initially?
Well, that's a tough question, and there's not a straightforward answer on that one. One of the things that we discovered during the development process is that when you put these 200 people in a room or in various rooms and ask what the ideal product is for them, you are going to get 200 different answers. So we tried to follow sort of, I'll call it the 95-5 rule, which is basically we can't quite get to the last 5% of obscurity that folks may be after, but we're trying to basically get 95% of what people might want in a product in the offering that you see before you. So there really isn't a way to approach things, because we've built this thing so people can take the way they do approach handicapping and be able to have the product answer the questions that come to mind. So we'll go through a couple of examples. You said somebody asked about angles, and I'll walk you through how somebody creates angles. Just to use an example, people will use this by having a bunch of angles in there. They will ask for alerts when those particular angles show up in a future race, and we'll demonstrate that a little bit. And that particular approach to handicapping may see, hey, I see these types of opportunities, and when these types of opportunities come up, I want to then dig deeper. And they'll go into past performances as they might traditionally, but having identified a handful of races because it struck a chord of interest based on a handful of angles that they themselves feel are important, either because they just feel it and they've observed it over time, or they've used one of the other product features and they went and actually tested out that angle. One of the interesting things that we have found is in the focus groups that we've run, which is also a part of how the product was developed, is that folks are often wrong. That they said, oh, I really like this particular play, and then they've gone in and they've used the product to we call it back testing that play, and they just had basically selective memory, and they were off. So that's one approach to it. Other folks use it almost like a research library. You mentioned the research tab on here, which we probably won't have time to get into today, but we'll be devoting a webinar just to that, where you can basically dig down and keep answering questions and basically peeling the onion further and further back to get into the particular area of the data that you would want. Another area that we'll touch on is the true odds section, and that's really, I'll call it the quasi-black box. It's where Stats brought their expertise of big data, where you can just basically jump to an answer, very, very, very quickly. If you're at the racetrack, it's going to point out here's the best overlay in the race, based on their big data research, and you just jump right into the answer. So the product really is designed to be used in any which way various people would like to approach the game and the way they handicap.
You mentioned one question that was asked, and maybe it's a good place to kind of wade into the graphics. And I mentioned Lewis's question about adding angles that aren't already listed. Why don't you bring everybody through the simple concept of the angles? And
okay.
That probably will open up. I mean, frankly,
sure.
It's a black hole.
Sure,
we
that's
end
fine.
up doing all of that.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that by example. So the way the product is set up, an angle, just so people understand this, is basically a theory, a particular aspect of handicapping that you think may have some value. And basically, there's billions, literally billions of angles, and actually within the product you could come up with more than 10 million angles. We don't have time for 10 million angles, so maybe we'll do one in real time just so people can get a sense. But the product does come loaded with a handful of angles that we think are meaningful, and they're a good starting off point for folks because they can take those and modify, or they can start from ground zero, which is what we're going to do right now. And then once you have an angle, you can just think about time, and you can go backward or forward. And if you have an angle that you think may have some viability to it, you can push a button and it will go through all the situations where those angles came up in the last 12 months. And you can also push another button, which I'll go through, that tells you, hey, tell me when these angles are going to come up in the next several days. So if folks focus on their screen right now, we're going to go into the product, and everybody has different screen sizes. And if you look at your monitor, just in the upper right to the right of the American flag is 4 arrows pointing up and to the right. In all 4 directions, and that can make your screen a little bit bigger if you're having trouble seeing us. But we'll go ahead, and if you look over here in the upper left-hand part, upper right-hand part of the screen, I'm circling it with my mouse, and I'm sorry you're seeing my name trailing the mouse icon there. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just related to the software. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Manage Angles. And we'll go ahead. These are a bunch of angles that I have in there. Some I created, some were supplied with the product, but we're going to go as you asked to go from square one. And we'll go ahead and start, I'm going to do an angle looking for a first-time starter. And I did look at this before. This isn't totally ad-libbed here, in a sprint race who's had a bullet work in the last 7 days. So you can name it anything that you want. And I'll go on and build the angle. And within these 4 tabs, there's all kinds of things, and you'll see different types of variables and criteria. So the first one here, I'm going to go to the track, surface, distance. These are the various things that you can filter on here. I'm going to look at the distance in a sprint race, and I'm going to add that criteria. So far I've narrowed down the world right now to races under just under 8 furlongs. Now I'll come into another variable, case, and I'm going to go days between starts. And since I'm looking for a first-time starter, there's basically no time between starts. So I'm just going to select first-time starters, and I'll add that. I'll go back into case, and now I'm going to look for workouts, and I'm going to look for a bullet workout that is a 4 furlong bullet workout. And again, different time periods here, different distances over here. I'll accept this set within 7 days ago.
David,
so I'm going to go ahead. Yeah.
Quick question there. When you're looking at a criteria like that, can you click on multiple? Can you hit a command and do 4 furlongs, 5 furlongs, or do you have to go back each time and keep adding, 4 furlong, 5 furlong, etc.?
In some cases, it really depends on the case. When you use something like the word or, almost like the way you asked, 4 furlongs or 5 furlongs or 6 furlongs, in those special circumstances, you would need to create basically different queries. But you could also in here, like you just mentioned, but we could do something like effectively doing what you asked with the word and. Okay,
there you
so
go.
I'm not going to do it. So you could do greater than or equal to 4 furlongs, and then another criteria, or less than or equal to 5 furlongs, and then in that case, I'd have everything between 4 and 5 furlongs.
So there you go.
What would be? Yeah, it's a little difficult to say within 4 or 5 or 7. That I'd have to split up.
Gotcha.
But you could create those ranges that way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll save that query. So now I have it to use for future. And if you notice here, I have 2 different options here. I can go find them in the future or I can go back test them. So I'll go ahead and click on back test. Now, the back test takes a little bit of time. It can take like a couple of minutes. But one of the things that happens during the back test is it just goes on in the background. So if I wanted to go and, let's say, create another angle or do something else, edit or go back to the past performances, I'm able to do that while this is happening. The other thing that happens is up here there's a little alarm button or alarm icon, and I'll get a badge, and it'll tell me I have one notification in there, and that notification is going to be, and hopefully this happens here soon, when this particular angle is figured out and when the back test is completed. But I don't only have to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just there's going to be, what's going to happen here is there's people that are already, I can see from the questions, there's things that the people have already waded into and are using as they're introduced to the product themselves, and we're going to be made aware of things that are on the screen that we just haven't even got to yet.
Right.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, actually, I failed. I didn't push the right button to actually go and do the back test, which I'm doing now. I failed to do that, and this is just reminding me. And so it will do what I was talking about. So while we're talking about it, but what I was getting at in the meantime, while we're waiting for this to come back, the product has a bunch of ways to notify people about stuff. So one is the alarm button. The badge will come in and tell me when that's ready. But another is this notification area. So inside the notification area, I can get emails or SMS messages for a variety of things that go on inside the product. So in particular, let's say I wanted to be notified when particular angles came up. So rather than necessarily having to be logged into the program, it would send me an email or a text message to say, on Friday at Belmont Park, your angle about first-time starters with a bullet workout, there's 3 horses on that day that are meeting that criteria for that angle. And there's also other notifications about files being ready and scratches and things like that you can set up by particular track. So this whole notification section, I just told the world about my cell phone. Everybody can ignore that. I'll get off that screen real quick. So while I was dilly-dallying around showing those notifications, you see up here this big number 1 badge that came up. And that tells me the software RaceLens has something to tell me. And in this particular case, here it is, the back test that I had asked for has been generated. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and that is going to bring me right back to that angle that I was doing the back test for. And you can see the search criteria in case I forgot about it by name. And it did a 1-year test. So there's 187 races, 199 starters. So some of those races had more than one starter that met this criteria. 15% win and place, 11% show, with a 4% ROI. So not bad. This success score is a number that Stats invented that basically 10 is great and 1 isn't so good, on the relative confidence that you can have in the success of this number. So the higher the ROI, the higher the success score would be. The higher the number of races, the higher the success score would be, because it's reflecting the statistical significance of a large sample size. So it all gets wrapped up to saying, hey, a bigger number is a better number, and you can have more confidence in that. So that's the back test piece of this thing. The next piece is that you could take a look at finding where these, when the angle is going to happen in the future. So let me go back to the angle itself, and there's the angle that I showed before. Let me just get back to running the search for it, and this will tell me when you scroll down this list. Here's the it at Parks Racing in the 3rd race. This horse, Hot Seat, is one that fit this particular angle. And so if I had those notifications set, I would have been notified by it by email. Maybe this one happens to have been from today, but it could be a few days from now, and then I might want to dive into that race a little bit more and use whatever handicapping techniques I want. But the angles feature, forward search, and back test. That's one of the you asked about how people might use this. That's one of the key ways that people could use this, and it's really a way that the product very much separates itself from other past performance products, even the highest end past performance products that are out there on the market today.
In terms of the generic angles, why don't you show the basic preloaded angles? They were up there for a minute, and show people how they can prune and edit.
Sure. So as I said, there's a bunch of angles that will come here that we call stats angles. And one of the things that will be coming, because this product is a never-ending venture, really. There'll be several iterations of the product. The product changes as we find new things that folks are interested in. And so one of the things that you'll see over time, where you see source here, and today the only two sources, that's me, DS2733, and the stats ones are the ones that come canned with the product. But there'll be others. So, Steve, if you're looking for a second line of work and you're an expert handicapper, we may take a contribution from you for Steve's favorite angles, and the source would be Steve's favorite angles. But you can come in and right now, like just in this case, I'll get rid of mine and filter and only see the stats angles. So here's just an example of one. The horse lost his last race, and there's a positive jockey change. And a positive jockey change would look at something like a jockey's win percent, which is low, let's just say 6%, going to a jockey change who has a 15% win percent, something like that. And you could come in here and click on that angle, and then you actually see the ugly details of the angle. That the finish position was not first, that there's a different jockey today, and that the new jockey is winning at a clip of over 20%. So you could use that as a starting point, let's say, and let's say, hey, I wanted to come in here and I want to define a jockey with a winning percent. I want to find even a better improvement. So I'll change it up to 25%. I'll save that, and it automatically renamed it. Maybe I'll call it 25% jock, and go ahead and save that angle. And then I could do the same thing, run the back test on it, see how it turns out, do the forward search to be alerted by it. And just because I have all those angles in there in the notification section, I can pick and choose which particular angles I want to be notified about. I don't have to, if I have 100 in there, there may be 10 special ones that I want to be emailed about.
Nice, and I want to pause here a little bit, and there's a number of questions that we should probably address that have come up in the chat applet, David. Let's slip those in.
Sure.
And part of part of the process here in terms of the back test. A couple of questions. One asking, how many tracks does that cover? And so that's the universe, basically, the North American racetrack.
Yeah, I see that. I see that. We have some stars here. I see that question from George Clooney over there. Yes, every North American racetrack is covered by the race lens system, and it includes all races where a man or woman is on the back of a horse. So I say that half jokingly, but it's not just thoroughbred races. Thoroughbred quarter horses, paints, Arabians, Appaloosas. In California, we have mule races as well. Pretty much everything but harness racing is in there.
Well, and you drive harness, right? You get into sulky.
Yeah, not just been in it. There's starting in October, I basically live in one. Yeah,
nice.
It's very, very, very expensive to live in the Bay Area, so I have to have two jobs. So I run Trackmaster during the day, and yes, on Friday and Saturday evenings, I drive at Cal Expo. Been in about 4,000 races and only got thrown out and fall on my head one time. But I mean, I love it. It's a great passion. But it really does help me here at work because even though I'm not on the back of a horse for the thoroughbred side, you really get to sort of feel some of the numbers. And you know, I've gotten many ideas for our harness products in particular, but also for thoroughbred products, just from actually being out there and competing on the racetrack.
Very cool. I'm going to kind of back a track and back that on you a little. When it comes to this, is there a way to segregate? You mentioned, you know, the universe of the racetracks. Is there a way to identify what circuits you want specifically included? There may be players that can net out, you know, the C tracks, the B tracks, or maybe they want to just do all the NYRA tracks or Northeast or whatever. That's available to you.
Yes. So if you go into like the filter section right away, you can see go tracks. So you just start typing like Saratoga, okay, and this is one of the ones where the ORs work. Let's get rid of that one. Or if I just want to look at circuits, you know, I can start typing, and here's the New York primary circuit that's going to include Aqueduct, Saratoga, and Belmont together. So yes, you can do that, and you can have your notifications parallel this. So here you'd be looking at whatever angle as they only happened at these three tracks. Similarly, you know, you could even go the other way and say, I want to look for horses who has raced at the Chicago tracks, you know, at Arlington, let's say, or Sportsman when it was open, and then say, okay, I want to forward look only at Saratoga. Now, it's not going to be significant sample size of horses who, let's say, did something special, or jockeys who did something, or trainers something special at the Chicago tracks. But you might, and say, let me see if they show up at Saratoga. Like I said, 10 million, I'm not exaggerating when you get into all the combinations of things that can happen in angles.
A couple other notes. There's some guys, obviously, that have been using the product already, and they're asking, in terms of past performances, why are we seeing only morning line as opposed to final track odds the day of the performance? That
if that's the way the question is, then that viewer would be slightly misinformed, because you do see the morning line odds, and you do see active odds in the product. So if you look over in this example here where I have this horse from Parks, the morning line was 4-1, and at 5-1, that 5-1 continues to change as the day wears on once wagering starts for that race. In fact, you can even see it here in a summary. And if we were looking at a live race card that was going on now and stared at that race, you would see these win probabilities, or that's the stats number, and the odds changing as time went along. Well, so it is interactive and it's live.
Well, that's the live side, but in terms of looking at previous races that have already been run, is what they're asking. If you pull up a PP, Dave.
Sure. You would see, and maybe I'm not remembering this right, so let's go to yesterday. We always keep a couple of days worth of races in there. So that's September 5th, so we'll go to the PPs. And this horse meant its final odds were 19-1.
Well, go down lower, down into the running lines. There you go. Now you went too far. Right in the middle there, you know, all the previous races. Take a look there.
Yeah.
And that's the closing odds there, isn't it? The 3.6.
Right. Yeah, the 3.6, and you can see with the mouse overlay for those of us who forget how to read it. Yeah, that's pretty standard. And you know, while we're here on this page, we'll get to another question. I should point out one other, what I think is an absolutely terrific feature of the product, and that's the ability to customize past performances. And there's lots of ways to do it. I'm going to show you one small way. If you see some of these numbers in here, like this number here, distance surface has a green highlight to it, that underbar the 17. That's just pointing out a trainer who at today's distance and surface had a highly above average win percent. people can take virtually, I don't want to say any variable, many variables in here and alter it. So instead of like you used to mark up a printed daily racing form, puts orange circles around thing or yellow highlights or underlines, you can come in here, and I'm going to show it to you quickly, and create these conditional formats. So here, for example, if I wanted a trainer who had above average win percents, right now it's being shown with a black letters and an underscore green. But let's say I don't know if I'm going to hit one of these or not because I didn't look at this particular race. But let's say I really wanted it very, very clear, with a circle around it and a yellow background to that circle. That's what it would look like in my past performances now if any trainer, because you can do it for trainer, jockey, pedigree, several different variables. That's what that would show. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then when I go back to the PPs, let's see if I get lucky. I got lucky. There we go. There's a trainer, this trainer, with above average is defined by 15%. Sticking out for me because it's the way I want to see my past performances. If I think, a trainer off a claim with a 15% or higher win percent is something that I think is an important handicapping factor, I can make it jump off the page. And you see that this template here just got saved as my template. I could have saved it any which way I wanted to name it. So maybe I have certain factors for 2-year-old races that I want to have them jump off the page. And maybe for Santa Anita downhill turf races, I want a different set of factors. And I could have named a template, Santa Anita downhill turf, that I would only engage when that type of race was going to happen and I wanted to take a closer look at it. So, I mean, you can change all that formatting. You can decide in many cases, would you rather see pace rating than actual leaders' times? Do you want to see lifetime running lines, or do you only want to see 3? Do you want to lay off? This is a long layoff line here that I'm underscoring with my cursor, with my mouse. Do I want to see it at 60 days, or you might think a long layoff is 45 days? All of those types of things can be changed by the user.
Let me get another question, and then I want to clarify the odds question too, David. The question coming from Gary about the numbers to the right of the odds before the first the win play show. Yeah, that column which looks like a variant.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah,
that's the track variant. Now, that's the track variant that that is computed by TrackMaster. And frankly, it's a number that I feel, this is now, everything I've spoken is factual. Now this is opinion, is pretty unimportant. And the reason why I think it's unimportant is that over in this box here, you have the class rating and the speed rating. And the Equibase speed figure already it basically reflects the track variant. So we split it out, and there's only one reason that we split it out, frankly, and that's because that's the way the Daily Racing Form did it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
80 years ago.
Right. So we just really have it in there for traditional sake. We encourage users basically don't pay much attention to it because it's already reflected in the speed rating that's there. And the class rating to the left of it is basically, it's a multiple meaning statistics. It's basically a relative measure of the competitiveness of the field. And it's also a pretty good indication of this prior to a race being run of the speed rating that you need to run to most likely be very competitive, close to winning that race. So we get asked sometimes, hey, I see a straight open 10 claimer at Aqueduct that's an 80 and another straight open 10 claimer that's an 84. How can that be? Well, it's not a par time because those numbers would be the same. It's reflecting the competitive nature of a particular field of horses. And it very well be, just the way things fall out, that two fields of 10 claimers, just by luck of the draw, one could be tougher than another. And that's why you'll see those differences in class ratings.
Want to also appreciate it. I want to also go back to Ali's question about those odds. What he actually meant, I thought he meant, in terms of the presentation of the PPs. What he's asking, David, is why can we not create an angle using the closing odds as opposed to the way the interface is set now, where the angle potential is based on morning line odds as opposed to what a horse may have gone off at in a previous start. And take a look at that again.
There isn't a good answer for that, frankly. There would be, if it's not in there right now, and I cannot remember every single statistic that's in here. But it's one of the variables that would certainly seem to me that we could add that, because that's a factual thing. It's not a moving target. So I don't see a reason why. I mean, I can't promise it can be in tomorrow, but that seems like a reasonable variable. I told you we were like 95-5, and everybody would have angles and angles. But one of the things, it's actually great that question came up, because we so much want to get the feedback from our users. And we do have, it's in the product, but I'll go ahead and say it here for feedback. We look at this every day. So we have an email address, which is statsfeedback, STATS feedback @equibase.com. And we love when somebody understands the product as well as that viewer did, and says, hey, I really want to be able to filter on closing odds. That's a great idea. Please send it in to us. And you'll be surprised how often we'll actually come through and do those things. May not be in a day, but it's something that we're, thanks for putting it up there, Steve, in the chat window, that we're very open to. And as I said earlier, we had a couple of hundred people giving us feedback about this product, so 201 would be nice.
On this topic, and for those of you that now the applet has gotten very active, Chris is interfacing and others. Ellis is on, Ellis Starr, of course. Lay out the resources, the live resources, the Twitter, and so forth. I think people are seeing a lot of industry interaction in terms of asking questions on Twitter and getting immediate responses. What are the resources available? I see also a question about a Facebook group for discussion and so forth. Lay out, David, the access to the public, who we should be watching for to ask these questions of. Sure.
Well, as you put up there, direct suggestions, that email address is a great one to use. There is an Equibase Facebook page, and posting comments and questions there is also very, very good. Equibase does have a Twitter account, and I'm going to get that, or Chris can put it up there, because I'm not remembering the exact, if there's a race lens group within that or not. We'll look for it and we'll get it out to you. But for sure, the stats, Chris is doing it now. It's at stats race lens. It's how you get to it, the @ sign, and stats race lens for Twitter. And as I said, the email address is a great one, and there's a Facebook page as well.
Very good. And
I can also, if you'd like, I have your cell phone, Steve. We can also put that out over there. We can have people call you there.
Very well. I would only turn around and some cases ask you, because I'm just overwhelmed. Some people have asked me that I've already discussed the product with, and said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I think it's terrific, but there's so much, and it's going to take a ton of interface. I think the more people utilize it, the more they're going to discover. And even if you were just to pick out a half a dozen or 10 angles that you recognize that you use in your handicap all the time. I mean, even if people were using this as a reminder, simply as a modern tool to text email you with the horses that fit your criteria, even if you just used it as that. I mean, as a subscription service, the thing is invaluable. To remind you of horses that are coming up. And we all miss every single week. You'll miss a horse that you were watching, and your stable mail didn't go, or whatever. Horses get entered back that you had made a mental note. This, as a service in that way, I mean, it's remarkable, I think, and the thing will pay for itself pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. Yeah, the Equibase Virtual Stable is a great service that we offer to the industry, but it is largely horse-based. It's not situationally based. So the angles, which we've mentioned, is one of the things that sets this product really apart from everything else. Takes the concept of the virtual stable, it takes a leap forward in terms of situational reminders after situationally back testing. You had asked earlier how people can use this, and I said there's as many different ways as there are different people. One of the ways I mentioned was just sort of jumping sort of to the answer. And we skipped by the research section, and I think we'll hold that for another webinar. That's where you can just go into all kinds of statistical details. But true odds, I'm going to talk about this for a moment. And I chose the stakes race yesterday from Del Mar to take a quick look at. And there's something that's goofing. I can tell you that there's something that's goofing up on my particular screen, because I played with the size of this to get it larger for people, so that's the way it would normally look. One of the questions, I don't know if I saw it come up or frankly if it was from an email earlier. Hold on a minute, that's my bookie. I'll tell him he has to wait. That's actually somebody wanting probably a tip at the Cal Expo racetrack, but they're closed. It is that we've brought all this technology and knowledge to bear for really the high-end player, and so much of the industry asks, what are you going to do for the newcomer? So this section of the product, while it's inside the high-end product, is also going to be offered very shortly as a standalone product, as well as it's just designed beautifully for smartphones and small devices. And this is what Stats is doing for the newcomer. But I'll just do a quick overview here and show you what's here, because this is a way for folks to really leverage the big data understanding of Stats. So what you see here is really a two-section piece of this True Odds module. And this is a short field, as we typically or often have in California now. And the first column here is the running style of the horse. And we're going to focus in on this yellow highlighted P as a presser. This is the morning line. This is the live odds. In this case, it was the closing live odds, but it would be the real-time odds if the race was going. And the true odds is basically, that's the magic number that Stats puts forth. And in this case, Stats is saying, hey, this horse ought to be at 6-5, but the odds of the horse are 5-2. We also can flip this around to percentages, where Stats is saying we think this horse has roughly a 45% chance to win the race. And you can flip those back and forth. And it points out the overlay at 6-5. And yeah, of course, I chose a race where it's going to work out. We always do that because this horse won easy. This is the type of thing where some people might just jump and say, okay, I'm going to look to see an overlay and maybe stop there. That's what the newcomer might do, or go backward and look at more specific information. We also have a race projection screen here, so you'd see P as a presser. You wouldn't expect to find him in the lead. This horse did sit off the pace in the early part of the race, in the middle of the part of the race, and did win easy. But for somebody who doesn't understand much about racing, or even a sophisticated player who just wanted a visual of what a race, how we think it's going to shape up, the True Odds module is something that is directed at that type of player. And as I said, the newcomer as well as a standalone offering.
Well, and you've mentioned this, and Larry Simpson is engaging in an interesting exchange. Larry's suggesting that the product is a little bit too a little bit too sophisticated. There's a lot of us here that are either longtime formulator users and people over the last year that have started to use Timeform US, and we're recognizing a lot of the features and then more that are all part of this. And Larry's making the point that this seems too sophisticated for a novice player. And how would we answer that, Dave?
Yeah. So I could not agree with Larry more. This, like, if there was a newcomer, I'd say do a 180 and run, because RaceLens is not targeted for the newcomer at all. So he's totally spot on. So what you have to do is imagine just what I'm showing you on this screen right now. Okay, that imagine this True Odds is a product in and of itself, and just what you see, with also a simple way to select the different races. That's what the True Odds standalone product is going to be, and it lays out beautifully on a telephone as well. It looks a little bit different. It's responsively designed, which means that it lays out different potentially on a tablet and specifically on a smartphone in a different way with slightly different menuing. But that's all that's there. So the novice can hopefully just see this basic grid and this basic picture. And if you want to just really simplify things, just look for the yellow. And if you look for the yellow, that's the horse you ought to bet. And there's another piece in here that works both for the novice and the sophisticated user, and that's to give the novice a little bit, start to feel for some of the factors in a race, even without fully understanding them. So I'm going to click on this where it says adjust win probability factors, and where we have about a dozen factors or so, and this list will probably get added to as well, and the relative influence that they have. Now here at 1, everything is neutral. But it happened to be, I did look at the PPs on this 6 horse, and it's the only horse in the race who's been in some higher end races, particularly I think it was the last time out or 2 times back was in a grade 2 race. So here's a way, like, take the class of the horse, I'm going to put it up to 5, which means 5x times it's important from the neutral position at 1. Okay, so we're going to weigh class more heavily than stats did on its own. And when I do that, in this case, you see the win percent goes way up, and they're saying, hey, if you really want to make, you as a handicapper want to make class even a little bit more important, this horse would become theoretically even a more prohibitive favorite. So to repeat, the RaceLens product is targeted, you mentioned Formulator or Timeform US, or TrackMaster has a product called TrackMaster Plus Pro. Or the higher end PDF PPs. That's the group of people that RaceLens is targeted at. And the folks who are more the novice level handicapper, when this product comes out, the standalone, which will be later this month, that's the product that's targeted for them.
We'll direct them more to that. And the advantage, and it's funny, I'm pulling up, I went off screen and I'm looking at Friday at Belmont at the stake at the Christie Cat, and it just so happened we had Chad Brown on today as well as Mark Cassie, and they both have horses in, and the rather simple and basic elements in terms of understanding pace and understanding running style, and even odds as a gauge for favorites and the strata of contenders. I think the beauty of this, I would argue that the elements are in place that would successfully introduce newcomers, novice players to the game, and then with added understanding, and as they begin to wade through the kinds of angles. It took me probably several years of reading handicapping books, and whether it was Beyer and Davidowitz and so forth, Ainsley, to understand even what the angles were, what they meant, what second off the layoff, what turf to dirt, what the route to sprint. To have that template of pre-existing angles that are established, that will lead a novice into the game much more readily, and they'll understand, even if it's sort of the tail wagging the dog. It'll help them understand the kinds of things that they should be looking for in past performances, as opposed to starting with past performances and then trying to figure out after the fact what went right for this particular horse to win. You're being introduced to the set of criteria that produces the winner of a vast majority of races. And so I guess people will have to fill in the blanks with their added comprehension, but I think, to me, it's a quantum leap forward in terms of introducing people to the game.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, we think this has the potential, as people start with the totally unsophisticated people with the true odds piece, to get them a little bit more engaged and to start questioning things, and sort of graduate, let's say, up to the more sophisticated product level. But we also want and recognize that there are many people who don't have real interest in going on to do all the study and want to go to the racetrack a few times a year and have a good time, and frankly not really win, but because that will be difficult for them, but to minimize losses and have more in their pocket to play more races and to enjoy things more. And that's why we didn't just stop at the race lens level. Why we said we really have to look at both ends of the market. And as I said, we'll be introducing the True Odds standalone later this month.
Very cool. Here's and thanks to Alice Starr, who's answering a lot of the questions that are coming up on the board. Not sure how much longer we're going to go this evening, but if there's any other questions out there that people want to slip in here tonight, talk a little bit about, maybe expand. In fact, I do see more of the odds questions coming up, and in fact, I just had one, and I'm going to lose it. Ali was asking, can players affect things like the true odds? Can they build their own factors in that would
yes and no. Yeah, they're limited to that adjusted true odds column is exactly there for that, by playing around with particular weights on these 10 particular, approximately 10 factors. Wow. And there are some that will be added, or at least are being discussed, like pedigree in particular, to apply to 2-year-old races and maiden races. And these various factors, they do stick with the races. So a subscriber who saves it can have them one way for one race, and it'll save it out and be different for other races. We haven't gotten to where we, I'll say, classify these, where you could save them and say, this is going to be my Belmont 2-year-old maiden special weight set of probability factors. That is something that's been suggested to us that we're considering. But this is the primary way that somebody can play around with what the odds that will show up on the screen. And they will be, by the way, that yellow highlighting where he talked about overlays, that is based on those adjusted true odds. So if somebody moves something around where something wasn't an overlay, and because they put more emphasis, let's say, on class, and it was a class horse and it becomes an overlay, then that would show. I thought I saw it rolled off the screen, but I thought I saw one about where you can get this. So before we close out, let me make my little pitch there. So today, the product is offered on the TrackMaster website, the TVG website, and of course the Equibase website. All of the major ADWs have inquired about carrying this product, and because it's a web-based product, we've set up all the technical mumbo jumbo basically, so it can be made available on any of those sites. And we expect the product probably by year's end to be on all the major ADW sites. And one of the advantages to that, and it's something of course we can't do, is we don't offer wagering. So folks can basically purchase the product at the same place that they're wagering. And I know that many of the ADWs for players who at least play that track or who play enough rebate the product to the players, so the player is basically comped and it's ostensibly free to them. We would expect ADWs to be looking at that as well. So the players who are their good customers would be able to get to this product. And one of the things that we will be looking at next year is actually integrating the product into the wagering. Not ourselves, but that somehow there's a betting, like a bet now button in there. When you've gone through this, you've made your decision, so you don't actually have to exit the program or flip windows. Right in there. Let's say you're a Twin Spires customer or an ExpressBet customer, and you like, let's say in this race that we're looking at here, the 5, and you want to bet the 5 across the board, you'd be able to do it right from here.
And a couple of little quick notes. Question about the True Odds screen. There is actually on your screen, and I actually have my own screen up, as I mentioned, for the Christie Cat on Friday, that fund odds. I'm going to guess that means fundamental, but it's not on the template that we see publicly. What's the significance of that?
You should be seeing everything that I'm seeing. So, see, we, as I said earlier, we allow the user to control as much as
there you go.
in many places. So here it depends on what you want to see. So you can display things as odds or probabilities. So I'm guessing that you may have it shut off if you're looking at yours. And if I want to see it, I'll turn it on and apply it, and then you see all the columns. So some people may, like the person who you talked about that was only potentially interested in their adjusted true odds, you can just show that and get the other ones out. The fundamental odds are the raw odds, basically initially looked at by stats without regard to morning line at all. And since this is an early file from Belmont for Friday's races, the morning lines have not been established by their race office yet. So basically, stats assumes all the horses are going to go for the moment, even though like the 11's main track only. And once the morning lines are established, these fundamental odds would stay the same. The true odds, because we've done work on looking at how morning line might affect the actual odds. The true underlying odds is a slight effect. They'll vary a little bit from that. And then, as I said, as the live odds comes in, that all of that stuff gets updated, every 30 seconds or whatever the tote provides us.
And I pulled up the display settings just as you suggested, and sure enough, the fundamental odds was turned off. And I'm going to make one suggestion to people, and as you can see when David is hovering the cursor, over the information dot, the information eye, and it tells you what a lot of these things are. I would spend a lot of time with each page that you look at, looking at the display settings, and then looking at things like the adjust win percentage probability factors. And this will be a tool that people will absolutely, ultimately, I think, find incredibly valuable. And I'll explain why. When we're at, let's say, Gulfstream in the winter, and think about this next, December, January, February, when that turf course is baked hard and speed is holding like crazy, you'll be able to take the slide bar and adjust the speed as a probability factor. You can put it on high, and all of a sudden it's going to adjust things and make horses jump off the page at you. There's a lot of those kinds of things. You can adjust to 4s and 5s. The more you play with these things, and I think the more you are self-aware about the strength of your handicapping ability and your ability to recognize conditions in circumstances, whether it, certainly track bias and track influence is a big, it's probably one of the last advantages we have as players these days. Your ability to adjust this information to tailor, to your viewpoint, it's only going to enhance this template and what's at your disposal. And I think long term and with experience, that's going to be one of the things that people realize. I mean, no two people are going to use that race lens the same, but everybody can maximize it to their individual strengths.
That's a really good point. And you talked about highlighting or mousing over those eyes. There's a bunch of different ways besides these webinars to learn about the product. And one is that question mark icon on every single page launches what we call a help overlay box. And it will point out things like all of these numbers that you see on the screen. And when you click on a number, it will, well, these are in the way, will drop this screen, but it tells you what it means. And equally interesting is that nearly every section of the website has this button that says tutorial. I think we have a total of 13 of them. And when you click, I'm going to let it only go for 2 seconds here. But the tutorial is specific to the subject matter that's at hand. So we're right now on true odds, and here's the tutorial on true odds. You don't even have to be in the product. The TrackMaster website and the Equibase website have all 13 of these tutorials, so you can learn about the products that way. People can also learn about the products even with spending no money. There's a free race every day, and while not 100% of the features are available, like back testing, most things you can go in and see how the product is going to operate. And I also, Steve, saw a question about money and about pricing. So the product is available 3 basic ways. One is one at a time race cards. Second one is a whole full day, all the race cards in a day. And then the other one is for unlimited, like during a month or a quarter or a year. And because this product is officially in beta until roughly midnight tonight, we were having discounted pricing at roughly 50% off. Some things were a little bit more, some things were a little bit less. But the product officially comes out of beta tomorrow, and that means it's, I don't want to say 100% of the bugs are out, but 99% of the bugs are out, and all the stuff is in there, and we're all good to go. But and I know I saw questions about this as I'm speaking with you. That introductory pricing goes till whatever midnight or tomorrow morning till we get in there and change things, and then things go up to the regular pricing.
Well, and even if people don't get subscribed, by midnight tonight, the per day cost, whether it's subscribed for a month, I mean, on a per day basis, it's actually very, very little. At an annual subscription, even the full price is less than $2 a day. So, in terms of having a tool at your disposal, and I really see the response from people regarding iPad. I personally cannot, for whatever reason, I have not been able to transfer to an iPad at the track. It's just not. It doesn't work for me personally. But I see how many players love the way it interfaces on their iPads, and that having all this information at your disposal, in your hand. I understand why everybody is impressed and appreciative of the way it interfaces on their pads. In terms of expense, it's very reasonable. It'll take one or two nice hits to pay for the year. So we encourage everybody. There's also a race of the day that's going to be available. There's going to continue to be stats angle of the day that will be circulated and emailed directly to people if you sign up. There's so many resources, and we're going to continue to on a regular basis have these these sessions and help players understand what they what's at their disposal with Stats Race Lens, and obviously the support staff, people already acknowledging how helpful everybody is. And for those of you on Twitter, you should be following Uber Capper, Ellis Starr, who is more than just the house handicapper for Equibase. He's a great ambassador for players of all levels, and yeoman's work here answering your questions, and has a great understanding of all aspects of the sport from a horse player side. Alice obviously can help you with whatever you need. I'll do everything I can as I learn along with most of you. David, congratulations to everybody involved in this. It's obviously been a huge undertaking, and we'll do everything we can to help players win using Stats Race Lens.
Well, yes, thank you. Thanks very much. We really appreciate your time. And as I mentioned earlier, it really has been a very strong team effort. And in particular, we don't like to always sort of name names, but since we're naming names, I will tell you that day in, day out, this project would not have been possible without the great work that two guys in particular have done. One sitting next to me, his name is Craig Walker, and he works out of our San Francisco Mountain View office, and you mentioned Ellis Starr. And these guys have worked tirelessly with the team at Stats, and Stats was in New York, LA, Chicago, and India, all four places on this product. So we're, literally round the clock in terms of when we can all get together on the phone. And their knowledge of racing and basically translating that knowledge into terms that the real big data expert can understand has been invaluable. And while many of us, you see Chris is on the chat, and Rhonda and other people at Equibase, that the real foundation in terms of knowledge to be able to make things work is those two guys. And I know the whole team at Stats and myself is very grateful to them. And you'll continue to see development. As I said, this is not a product that stands still. It will continue to be enhanced as time goes on. And we hope the world out there really can take their own handicapping to another level using this really terrific tool. And Steve, thanks again so much for taking your time out of your evening to help us through this thing today, and we look forward to doing other webinars.
Without a doubt, and for those of you that are hanging in for the evening and ready for the next layer, 8:30 at horseplayernow.com. We've got night school tonight. We can use some race lens to look at Kentucky Downs. We're going to talk about how to handicap Kentucky Downs with Jeremy Plonk and I at 8:30. So it all continues. There's so many things at everybody's disposal, and the industry has tried to respond to everybody's ideas and requests, and everybody, I think, pulling in the right directions. David, thanks so much. We look forward to the next time we get together and answer questions like these.
Very good. Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks for participating.